Hello, and welcome to another episode of Can I Come Over? We're your hosts, Nicole,
Julia,
and Renata.
So, for today's episode, we're going to be discussing something that maybe is quite relevant today, and that is if we should get flip phones. We should get flip phones. Should we get flip phones? And should we bedazzle them as well?
Oh my god, they have to be cute.
Yes. But before we get into the episode, let's, as usual, start with our current obsessions.
Guys.
Renata.
Oh my god. Let me tell you. Let me put you on some more music. So, a couple days ago, very, very, oh my god, this album, I can't get over it. I've been listening to it on repeat. It's called Cancionera, and it is by Natalia Lafourcade. So she's a Mexican songwriter, singer, musician. She's won multiple Grammys, Latin Grammys as well. Very recognized. And this album is just such a beautiful mix between Latin jazz and acoustic and maybe a little bit of pizzazz as well. It's such a lovely album. It is a little bit long, and I like it because it's a bit more of an exploratory piece. She always goes out of her way with all of her albums, but this one especially has been my obsession this week.
Slay. We love.
Yes. And Joey, do you want to tell us yours?
Yes, mine. Guys, the edits made it to me. I have been trying to run, but they caught up to me. And I have been watching When Life Gives You Tangerines. I caved. I tried, but I caved.
The silence.
I caved. It's, oh my god. And it's, I'm 2 episodes in and I have already cried twice. Oops.
I'm scared of watching it just because of that.
Again, making me cry is not that hard. It is a K-drama for those of you who don't know. It's super cute. It jumps back and forth between a bunch of timelines. And it's very adorable, very cute. And currently I've just, like I said, finished episode 2. And let's see if I survive this because I don't know. But it's amazing. It's a cute, passive, casual watch. And, a chill one.
Mine is a little bit not embarrassing, but I don't know. It's the Harry Potter movies because I have just finished watching all of them for the first time right now.
Like 2 hours
literally, yeah.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to watch them, but I just never got to sitting down and watching it. And I also, it's one of those things where it's so hyped up that you just you're
is it worth it?
Yeah, you're just whatever. But I finally got to watching it with you guys.
Yeah, we sat her down and
they forced me to watch it. But I love them. Mm-hmm. I love them, and I do want to read the books now because I have watched the movies. But yeah, I love them. I don't think I have to say anything more about them because I'm sure most of you guys have probably watched it.
It lives up to the hype. Guys.
Yeah, it is. I would definitely say that it is. I also think that I would have loved watching it as a kid. I would have, it would have been my hyperfixation when I was 12, 11, 12 years old if I had watched it. But I'm glad I did now at least. So, yeah. That's my current obsession, and we can get started on the episode today.
Let's jump right in, guys.
I'm gonna start with a small little anecdote. So yesterday it was a little bit in the evening. We were all hanging out, and we were like, guys, let's talk about what to do tomorrow for the podcast. What are we filming? What are we doing? And we spent the next 40 minutes to an hour just on our beds scrolling on TikTok and Instagram. And that is why I think we should all get flips.
Based on personal experience.
It's so ironic to think that we took that much time and then we sat around, we're like, we should get flip phones. Here's why we should get flip phones. And we're like, guys, so hypocritical. But again, that is bring me to the point of why does this actually happen? Why do we spend 40 minutes to an hour to sometimes even more, 2 to 3 hours just doom scrolling and doing absolutely nothing? And what is the actual extent to which this can be harmful. But to start with, I have an idea of what I found on the internet as to the consequences cognitively. Like, how does this whole thing of like the smartphone or like the digital era more so affect us cognitively? And it is quite alarming because there's some good and there's some bad as well. Mostly bad, but
Not to be pessimistic.
I have 2 points for good, and they're both basically the same thing. And it is the fact that it actually does help a lot in the field of education, like educating kids and like visual learners. Like, I feel like the idea of being visual learners is very interesting, and how these kinds of technology and just the newer era of visual technology is very helpful in people who have tendencies to like retain things better when they see it rather than when they write or learn, hear about it. And having said that, that's the only good thing I have.
So, buckle in your seatbelt, guys.
Exactly. Now, moving on to the bad. It's actually a much longer list, and the first one starts with how it actually is quite detrimental to academic performance, because although it helps visual learners, it is also detrimental to your attention span and your ability to retain information. Because of the constant overstimulation that you find around yourself, there's always information being flung at you from everything. So to retain things that may be useful for you in an academic sense is quite difficult. And then this is something I found quite curious, is that language development among kids get quite hindered because of social media. Or not social media, because of digital media or like smartphones or screen time. And this happens because in order to develop languages and understand social cues when it comes to languages, it is important for us to spend time with the adults in your life as a child. And when you're spending more time with a screen rather than with an actual adult, then you don't build those linguistic like capabilities that come from conversations. Obviously, you can build a lot of it by seeing it on a screen, but a lot of the non-verbal cues, etc., are picked up by having actual conversations with adults or with caregivers, and that is pretty much like non-existent when it comes to an extreme screen time. And another one is how it hinders social and emotional growth as well. There is actually, it has been proven that higher screen time can lead to a higher likelihood of having these conditions, which include obesity, sleep disorders, and mental health issues like depression and anxiety. Now, obviously, I'm not telling you that your phone is what's causing you your depression and anxiety. That would be really dumb. But all I'm saying, and all this article that I found says, is that it increases your likelihood to have these circumstances or have these illnesses or conditions. And there's actual studies to back it up as well. And it also, quite curiously, reduces your ability to interpret emotions, which is very interesting because the emotions that it can kind of hinder interpreting is like anger or rage. And it also just, in general, overall harms your psychological health significantly. And a lot of it also is not understanding social cues because you're not spending the right amount of time with other human beings. And humans being social beings, it lets go of a lot of social cues, or like our mind is not able to capture a lot of the social cues that we otherwise need. And these are all how it works with kids. Not that it will not happen to adults, but this is how it is with kids, which is easier to understand because as kids you develop habits.
That's
And-
actually crazy.
Yeah.
I'm hearing all of this. I'm in utter shock. That's insane.
The extent to which it impacts us, actually, we don't really realize it at all unless you sit down to think of it. And mentioning kids, the very interesting concept.
iPad kids.
Oh, what do we think about iPad kids?
Guys, it's a phenomenon. It is a phenomenon.
So for those of you who are not aware of what the concept of iPad kids are, it's basically, it's not kids who were kids when iPads came out. It's actually a subgroup of those. And Gen Zs seem to have a very strong opinion of these iPad kids
Yeah.
and their parents. And it's a whole concept there. But to get to know more about like iPad kids and what they are all about, I would recommend this article in the Today by Rosie Colosi. It is just really good, goes into great detail about their psychology and why it's important to like set boundaries, because that's exactly what you need to do with these kids, because it's not like you can take all the screens away from their lives, because that's not possible. We live in a world where screens are important. So what you can do is regulate. You cannot avoid it, so you can simply just regulate it. And all of this sort of is like a little bit leading, also not leading into my next topic of like, do you think it makes us lazy?
Yes. I think so.
Having the smartphone and having that amount of technology at our fingertips, do you think it makes us lazy?
Yeah.
Do you
Like
think so?
to a certain extent it does.
I don't know. I genuinely don't know. Like, I don't know. I'll keep on hearing this. I'll keep on talking to Julia, and I'll continue to think about this.
Yeah, but I mean, when I say does it make you lazy, you're probably thinking about the perspective of like, oh, having everything at your fingertips and the convenience makes you a lazy person. Modern technology makes people lazy. You're probably thinking of all of that. But actually, what I would like to bring up is a different perspective as to how we now as a society rely on our phones to do things that we were naturally, cognitively capable of doing a couple of years ago. For example, can you remember more than 5 phone numbers that's in your contact list?
No.
Exactly.
I know 2.
That's it.
I know. Does mine count?
I know 2 is mine and my dad. That is it.
I know my mom's and my dad's. That's it.
Yeah?
Well,
So
I know my landline.
I know my landline from like 15 years ago. That thing does not work anymore.
Because
I know
you
it.
did not have a smartphone then to save it on.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's where I mean, like, having that level of reliability strips away a lot of things that we otherwise just did at the snap of a finger. Because I know when I was like 7 or 8 years old going to school, my parents made me remember every phone number and my, like, at least the important ones in my life.
Yeah.
But now, no, I don't know. I don't know any. I need my phone. I need my contact list. It just basically makes us intellectually lazy.
Yeah.
It may not make us physically lazy in the sense like, oh, I want to order food instead of actually going and picking it up. That's a matter of like convenience. That's technology work. That's what technology is for. But it makes us intellectually lazy in some sense. And it also like sort of brings in the idea of how meeting new people makes us lazy in that sense as well. Because why would I go meet people in like a physical setting at like a university event or something when I just have Instagram to scroll on and find new people in the suggested section? Why should I do that? And that's what like brings me to a point of how like social media often gives us the illusion that we are more connected to people than we actually may be in reality.
Yeah.
This is something I'm sure we'll touch on more later on.
Yeah.
But it sort of brings also the idea of like parasocial relationships, how we often feel like we're more connected to a celebrity or like an internet persona because of the fact that we see their social media, but we are not really connected to them because we don't know anything about them. And it's so funny because this whole idea of like the intellectual laziness is sort of defined as the curse of our generation.
And that's I've seen so many like posts on LinkedIn and stuff where people are like, oh, Gen Zs can't be hired because of how lazy they are, and this is what they usually argue with,
like the dependency that we have on our devices, which partly good, partly bad. I'm not anti-technology.
And then the other thing is with parasocial relationships, how nowadays I think you have it, I don't know if you have it on Facebook as well, but definitely on WhatsApp and on Instagram, how you have like the channels.
Yeah.
And it's almost as if you get a message directly from an artist or from somebody else. I mean, it's not to say that parasocial relationships did not exist before. They have been around for as long as the whole concept of celebrities and like
fan culture.
Like that has been around for ages, but it's the way that it has evolved that is so
much more
intense.
Intense. But about like how they, like you said, the thing on LinkedIn, how like people are not hiring Gen Z because they feel like there's a stunt in like are like there's so much dependency that there's a stunt in motivation or a stunt in creativity. Even a lot of people think that. Now, I'm not saying that creativity cannot come from like stimulation, because it does a lot of times come from stimulation and inspiration. And you, like, your thoughts always stem from like a memory or an idea that you've previously had. So they obviously come from stimulation, but it does make you wonder that if you did not have all of this clutter and noise around you, what would your brain actually look like? What would your thoughts actually form up without all of this clutter? And I feel like this is a very interesting thought and an interesting idea of how there is some truth in this thing of how boredom sometimes does create, and the lack of any stimulation sometimes leads to creativity. And I think that's a very interesting perspective, and I definitely want to know you guys' opinion on this.
I think, I don't know, not necessarily boredom for me, but I find it, I don't quite agree with that statement of like boredom stems or roots creativity. Sometimes it can be, because it's just the brains or the human need to want to do something, to want to create something or accomplish something or solve. But I think it's more that the need and the existing problem rather than boredom itself, the one that roots creativity. Because I see it as a lot like every single big invention that has been created or done, it comes out of a need, out of identifying a problem, and hence creating a need for a solution. And that could be in any way. It can be the electricity, it could be the internet, or it can be a creative need, the need to express emotion. So I think I quite disagree with that statement.
Yeah, but again, like I said, it does come from stimulation as well. It's just that I agree with you to an extent, but like I would word it in such a way that when you have a need to solve a problem, like you said, or like you have a problem at hand, with boredom, you have to face it. But when there's clutter, you can escape it.
That's a good point.
So I think it's a dichotomy here.
That's what I was also going to point out, because like if we want to bring the context of social media specifically, there's social media, people use it as an escapism, and people use it to like just kind of let go of their daily activities, etc. And because of that, they're so overstimulated already with what's happening on social media that they don't have their brain doesn't have the space to kind of be creative until or unless there's something that inspires them on social media, and then they're like, oh, this would be cool. But then it's only when that they have that free time that do they think about putting these activities into play. I think that's a good way, like that's a really important point, because I found that social media often like tricks us into socializing. Like the whole illusion, it gives us an illusion that we are constantly in touch with people because we see people's stories, we see people's posts, we like, comment, share, etc. But do we actually talk to these people? We feel like we are in touch with these people, but we've probably never heard from them or like actually had a conversation with them in months.
You know what? Something like that I find super, super interesting, that because of this kind of like idea of like connectivity and socializing that social media kind of has on us, and this illusion, there's also this backfiring where people are constantly like, oh no, but I don't want to unfollow them, or oh, I don't want to block that person because of X, Y, Z. It's not that deep. You haven't talked to this person in ages. And it's literally that. It's just like a socializing illusion of like, oh, but they're my friends. I'm connected to them somehow, simply because you occasionally might see each other on your feed.
Yeah, exactly.
Even though you haven't had a proper conversation with them in years.
Exactly. And it's just this like loophole in a way for people to like not exactly socialize, but unintentionally, because I don't think we mean to like not hold a conversation with someone, etc. But when we filmed this episode, a certain event has just happened, not necessarily an event, but in Spain and Portugal, where the electricity went out for almost 7 hours. And by the time this podcast airs out, we'll probably know more information about that. I don't know. But as of right now, we don't really know anything. But what I want to bring up is how, I kept seeing a bunch of TikToks and reels on my social media about what people were doing when the electricity went off. People were out on the streets talking to strangers, playing cards, playing instruments, just having the best time of their it looked so much fun because they didn't have electricity and they were not on their phones. People were not isolated. People were all together. And the world did not end.
The world did not end, guys.
The world did not end.
I saw one of them that was like, went to Spain, the light went out, and I accidentally time traveled back to the 90s.
I feel like it opened such a different perspective for people because we don't really think about what life could be like if we don't have our phones.
Yeah. It's such a present
keep in touch
thing
with people. Exactly.
It's almost an extension of yourself.
Exactly.
It is.
Like you need to have it on you. Gives me a lot of anxiety when I can't see my phone.
Like my phone is right next to me right now. Like I can't. But it's such a bad habit, and like this particular situation, I feel like has opened up a whole new conversation on the internet right now. At least I have been seeing people are like they should make this a weekly thing. Like the governments should make this a weekly thing because
cut down the Wi-Fi.
Yes, because it was a really nice experience for people, and in a way, there's an article from Penn State University which was released in 2021, and it addresses how like social media is changing, the way that we get to know each other, the way that we get to know one another, and the way that you understand people. What are certain things that you pick up of people? For instance, when you meet someone in person or when you're talking to someone in person for the first time, you can pick up nonverbal cues. You can pick up certain mannerisms of them that help you understand who they are as an individual. But on social media, when you're meeting someone new, you don't really get to see that side. We already touched up on this on a previous episode, how there's no way of like expressing yourself emotionally because how do you understand what the tone of the person's voice is or what they're saying is, etc. And then there's also the parasocial relationships that was already mentioned, the whole we feel more connected to certain people because we specifically famous figures because we see them so often on social media, and I think influencers also because of how often they post on social media especially. But speaking of influencers, there's also another aspect of this, which is FOMO. The fear of missing out. For those of you who don't know, it is the feeling or perception that others are having fun or living a better life than yourself. And there's a whole article about the psychology of FOMO by Cleveland Clinic, which was released in 2023. And it states that social media hijacks our need to feel belonged by stimulating the acceptance or the idea of acceptance from a collective group of people. We want to follow trends because if we don't follow trends, then we feel left out and we're isolated from a certain community. And there's also proof that there's health issues when it comes to FOMO. People get so much anxiety that it leads to stomach tension, nausea, headaches, emotional distress, etc. And all of these things play into it. I'm sure all of us here would have experienced FOMO to a certain extent.
100%.
What do you guys think is one of the biggest tellings, or not necessarily telling, but what is one of the biggest, way that you experience FOMO?
I mean, I remember a lot when I was back in middle school, and later on in middle school, if there was, I don't know, gathering or a party going on or a group of friends, and even if they asked me and I was not able to go and I told them I cannot go, I will still look at their stories. I would sometimes replay the stories being like, oh, I wish I was there, or they're having fun. Like,
Yeah.
what else did you expect? Of course they're having fun. They asked you, they invited you to this event. Like, and if it was in another context where somebody else didn't or anything of the sort, like this feeling of almost like this little thing on your chest, it's still there and it kind of leaves a
Yeah.
bitter taste in your tongue.
Yeah.
It's just
I think
Yeah.
for me, like, it's a little bit the same, but in a different context, where it's like having to keep up with pop culture. I feel like this is something that like always gets on my nerves, where like people almost expect you to know pop culture events and like know, I don't know, a certain movie or a certain artist, or it's just like expected, like because they know it, or like because it's pop culture, or because it's what is happening in the world of Chronically Online. So it's just like there should be no need to keep up with that. I feel like that's kind of frustrating.
Yeah, but because of that, it creates a sense of FOMO because
FOMO,
you feel
definitely.
ashamed. In
Yeah.
a way. Not necessarily ashamed,
Not
but
ashamed. I feel like you feel rather left out,
yeah.
or that you are not knowledgeable enough,
Mhm.
where this is not
It's
really the
not
peak of
really-
knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that literally the whole like missing out on a party. I remember when I was 11 or 12, I was on my way to a birthday party and we met with an accident. And I wasn't worried about the accident. I was worried about missing the party. I was like, I need to be there because I have such
teenage
FOMO.
behavior.
But in contrast to this, there's now also ROMO, which is the relief of missing out. And I was, searching up, like doing some research on this and searching up on TikTok about what people are saying about ROMO. And I saw this one TikTok by @GStadGuy, and he said, quote, "If I hear of a dinner I have not been invited to, I feel relieved." I feel relieved, he said. But also, the more professional definition of ROMO is often associated with avoiding news and what's going on social media or like in the world, I mean, rather than avoiding social media trends and stuff. It's more so to do with what's happening in the world. You see the news and you see that a lot of bad things are happening around the world, and people find that relief of missing out on that as well. Maybe that's a way of comfort. There's not much extensive research done on this yet, but that's what I could get from it. I'm also curious to know if if the pandemic has something to do with this as well, this whole idea, because we spent almost 2 years not really socializing with people. Does it stem from that in a way? Because again, there's not much research done on this phenomenon. So I have a lot of questions about it and like the psychology behind it. But we can leave it at that for now. And I want to know what you guys think as well about this whole idea of relief of missing out. But let's take a short break before we continue with the last segment.
Hello, welcome back, everybody. All right, so we've talked about attention spans. We've talked about how maybe our phones are making us lazy. We've talked about iPad kids. Now, have you guys heard of a cute little something called single purpose devices?
I think I've heard about it briefly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not 100% sure what it is because I haven't done any research on it. But I think what it is like allocating different devices for different activities.
Not really.
Okay.
Not exactly, but it's somewhere along those lines. So let's get into what is a single purpose device. So there's this article published by Rishikesh Srihari. I'm Srihari, yes, that is a nice name. Titled Importance of Single Purpose Devices in a Distracted World. And the author basically kind of goes on to describe what it is, what's a single device, what is the kind of functionality of it, and why it's important. So this is basically a device that serves only one purpose or function. So kind of, along those lines, but it doesn't necessarily mean allocating a singular function to a device, but rather a device that only has one function. So for example, cameras for taking photos. Walkmans for listening to music, or iPods for our generation for listening to music, alarm clocks to wake you up. So devices that just have one or very limited purposes or functionality to it. And in doing so, there's kind of this argument that maybe multifunctionality is a form of distraction. So I'll get a little bit more into multifunctionality in a little bit, but with everything that has been going with social media, with technology, the developments that we have been seeing as of late, there's this pushback to go back to single purpose devices. People are more frequently buying alarm clocks and more frequently buying cameras and digital cameras. Have you guys seen like the popularity of digi cameras?
Yeah, sure.
Why might this be? It's as a result of this kind of resistance against the overconsumption and overfunctionality that all of these devices give us. Originally, our iPhones and other Android devices did not have the many features that all of them have. When Apple first came out with it, it was revolutionary for a number of different reasons. But then when Samsung came into play and there was now this bigger competition of the two powerhouses, that is when they started adding feature above feature above feature above feature above feature. And that is referred to by Christoph Wagner on Forbes as the digital Swiss Army knife. I like that term. I quite liked it when I read it.
Yeah.
And it's in his article, A Revolution from Single-Purpose Devices to Smartphones as Multi-Tools. So Wagner argues that, the multifunctionality from devices is actually good. And there's a lot of people that still have this perspective. I agree with it to a certain extent. There's a things of it's practical, it's easy. You, quote unquote, save money because you're no longer having to spend on an alarm clock, the batteries for an alarm clock, the camera, the charger for the camera. It's just my phone and my charger and an outlet. That is it. And so with this comes the idea of replacing hardware, so actual physical devices, with software. And that's what a lot of apps have. And, at the end of the article, Wagner even goes on to say, if you want to have or do something new, double check there's probably an app for it. Kind of, there's so much available,
there's
everything.
even apps like that give you the effect of a digital camera.
Exactly. There's apps that give you the effect of a digital camera. There's apps for healthcare, for police, for so many things, for public services, for keeping track of your period,
Some can even track your heart rate.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
some
heart rate, your sleeping patterns. So many things. There's an app for everything. There's an app for absolutely everything. There's an app for, now, I think it was a couple updates ago that Apple incorporated the journal app. You don't even need a journal anymore. There's a journal app on Apple now, other than your notes app, which you could have used for a while. And this whole concept became revolutionary. But once again, we come back to the need now and the pushback for single-use devices, because although it might be revolutionary and I can do so many things with one device, we also see this alternative pattern of dun dun dun, the Apple ecosystem. Jovi makes fun of us for it because she's an Android user. And rightfully so. I understand. I understand the hatred. I am an Apple user myself. I have a Mac and I have my phone. And I have been also very tempted to get an iPad. But, it's devices that share multi-purpose features and they basically do the same thing. And it's just the way that they package it and they sell it to you is, oh, but you can now work seamlessly between interfaces, which most of the time is not actually true. Samsung does, and just Android does a way better job at that, at working between devices and multiple devices and all that sort of stuff. And there's a question of, is it just a simple manifestation of consumerism what we're seeing? Is it just, do you guys think that it's just like, is it actually for the purpose of wanting to be multifaceted and improve functionality, or is it just simply consumerism? Because all the things the new phones can do the same as really good cameras. The new iPhones can do the same as really good cameras, same as the Lenovo phones and Huawei phones, and they're like the cameras and the quality is really, really ridiculously good. You look at iPads now, they have really good cameras for no reason. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna be walking around with my cardboard. And now they have also the keyboards that you can add on to act as a computer, but then people still get computers, right? But then they have their iPads, but then they have their phones, which now they can do a bunch of other things. And if you have the Pro or the Max, you have more screen, and so you can do dual screens, and they all do the same thing. The processing chips are better than before. Some phones process, video editing better than older computers, and you just need one device, and yet here we are with like 4 or 5 different things, not to mention the Apple Watches as well.
I have an opinion, actually, something that I think is like touches upon a lot of things that you mentioned, but I would like to preface it by saying that I do not hate Apple devices. I have used a couple of them and I do not mind them. I just have a preference. Because the other family of devices are more compatible with each other. Like Apple kind of, I feel like from what I've seen you guys do, they kind of need more Apple devices to be compatible with. Whereas the other ones, like I have an HP laptop with a Google Pixel phone and a Huawei smartwatch. And they're all like compatible with each other, and a Sony headphone. So they're all compatible with each other and they work in tandem. That's like kind of my only gripe with Apple. I don't hate it. But my opinion here was that oftentimes the idea of like simplicity and connectivity is to give you an illusion of the fact that you're having underconsumptionism, but in reality, you're just feeding into overconsumption. What these apps and these like having so many things in the same dashboard give you is an idea that you're limiting down. You're making things simpler. But again, by signing yourself up to all of these services, you are consuming more at the end of the day. So it just builds an illusion. It does not take those things away. It repurposes them and then builds an illusion of the fact that you have it all in one place.
And I think it's really, these devices are not going anywhere, and Apple will continue to come up with updates, and they will continue to make the interfaces more seamless and more features, and there are more apps put on the Apple Store and the Google Play Store every single day. And people have already invested into these devices. They've already, put substantial amounts, because nowadays phones are not as cheap, quote unquote, as they used to be before. Especially with the things that we now require. Sometimes you need, it's come down to the thing of like, that we mentioned before, it's an extension of ourselves. And even the current systems that we have in play right now require us to rely on our phones, our you can pay with your phone now. You can have your public transport pass there as well. Your medical history when it was COVID as well. Some countries had it. If you did not show on your phone that you had the vaccine or that you had the test, you could not enter the building. And it was not a physical copy. It was all digital. So we heavily rely on our phones. As a result, because people are still continuing to invest on it, because there's this like need and investment and endless loop, people are now resorting to other things called dumb phones, which I love that. It's either phones that still have a lot of these features, but are very minimalistic, very dumbed down, very simple, will do the bare minimum of things, which was where we were about 20 years ago, more or less. Or the other flip side, which is making your phone, the idea of like making your phone boring. I shared a video with you guys the other day about it. I loved that. It's a certain way that you can format your phone, especially with now widgets and all that sort of thing. You can link different apps to it in order to make your phone as simple and as basic as possible. Completely basic, where you have no icons, no emoticons, no flashy things or anything of the sort. It's just basic messages, photos, this, that, just the bare minimum in terms of framework that will then help with things of even seeing the symbol of an app or the color of it just has this urge of like, I want to click on it already. And so it breaks it down to the bare minimum to kind of simulate the idea of a single purpose device. So I find all of those concepts really, really interesting. I've kind of done something like that with my phone. I think even making little changes like that can go a long way.
And setting locks for apps, timers.
Setting locks for apps. Oh, there's this one app. Wait, I need to find it. Hold on, give me 2 seconds. I will find the app that I have it set for TikTok primarily. And a friend actually showed it to me. It is called, I will find the name and I will put it in the description, Screen Zen. Screen Zen is such a good app because it allows you to put a lot more detailed locks for certain apps. So you can have, instead of the traditional screen time lock that you can always click like, skip 50 more minutes, 10 more minutes, or ignore for the day. Every single time that you open up the app, it will not be the app itself, but it will just be a blank screen, and you can put a custom message on it. So for example, for me is, do I need to check it? ? And then if you want to actually go through with the app, you can put a timestamp. So you click disable and you set the time that you want. I have it for TikTok, I have it set to 30 seconds. 30 seconds is more than enough. I get way too lazy and I just simply do not open TikTok. Purely do not open it. And it could be as simple as, but delete the app. Guess what? We kind of do media communications. I kind of need to use it for projects and posts and for even for the podcast. We need to use it. So even putting things like that, locks, making it visual. We talked about time spans as well. The fact that it's 30 seconds, I can't handle that. And I go, goodbye. I close my phone and I go do something else. But we talked about a lot today. Yes. I think from getting to understand where the attention span situation is coming from to our new perception of socializing, and even down to how can we help ourselves a little bit better, and the whole concept of single purpose devices, I think it's a pretty good episode, guys. And we hope that some of this might have either shed some light or might have helped you out, and hopefully your screen time is a little bit lower by next week. But yeah,
I think that's it for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for listening. We hope you have a great day, and you can come knocking whenever you want. Bye-bye.